to me, that's the closest thing to a true divine religious experience I've ever had, to experience what that creative process feels like in the moment when it's just you alone with a vague idea, with a vague plan, and you have the courage to put your hands on that keyboard and suddenly something starts to come to you.
What's happening?
Great to see you, man. Great to see you. Always.
Thanks for taking the time to do this. We're right. We took a picture standing right here.
I know where you are.
2 years ago?
About a while ago.
Dang, man.
A while ago. Then we had that great dinner.
That was awesome. It was so cool. I told my son, my youngest, that I was going to talk to you today, and he said, "Is that the guy I played ping pong with?" So you're the guy he played ping pong with, which is very cool of you, by the way. Thank you for doing that. That was awesome.
As I recall, we had like a 2-hour conversation at the steakhouse in Park City, right?
That's right. That's right.
Just on that. That was a good talk.
That was awesome. That's awesome. We got to do it again. We got to do it again soon.
Is there snow on the ground?
There is, but it's melting. And so we'll get hit again here at some point, and then it'll stay. But it's the resorts are frantically making their own snow right now.
And is the car compound grown, or are there any new structures up there? Are there like underground bunkers, survival tactics, anything going on?
Some of that's classified, but there's an 3D archery course that is set up around with about 22 different targets out there that I can walk, and then there's an outside gym. So I'm working out in the snow, trying to get back in shape. It was a rough, well, I shouldn't say rough. It was a great 6 years, but it was focused solely on writing and building, whatever this has become. But there was no time for sleep, eating right, eating clean, working out, none of those things. And this past August, I figured I pushed it about as far as I possibly could and started working out again, getting some sleep, eating a lot cleaner, those sorts of things, doing the little sauna. So started doing that. So I added an outdoor workout area. So it's like Rocky IV outside with a little snow on the ground, and it's awesome.
Here's what I want you to aspire to. You ready? This is Chinese Special Forces training. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Introducing the new Jack-Car BCM Mod 4 grip. Reduced angle for improved ergonomics and trigger control. New aggressive grip texture to maximize traction. Extended forward tang to close the gap between the trigger guard and pistol grip. High-rise beaver tail style backstrap. Open bottom to minimize weight. Includes mounting hardware for mil-spec lower receivers. Manufactured in the USA from high-quality impact-resistant polymers. Go to BravoCompanyUSA.com and get yours today.
Chinese special. Are you familiar with Chinese forces, special forces training?
Not as much as I am with other countries. Oh, here we go. Okay. Oh, there. Whoa. All right. Wow. Wow. Is that real? That's not real.
I don't know, man.
Had me for a second. I'm thinking that might be a little AI action. That might be a little Hollywood right there.
Oh, God, saying it so, yeah. I don't know, man.
I'm thinking I'm skeptical of this. Yeah, highly skeptical.
Well, they're making a move.
Creative editing, at the very least.
Yeah, I think you're right. Would China do that to us?
No.
They wouldn't put
Wouldn't dare.
Most soldiers doing insane training to fuck with us a little bit with it.
No, they'd never go that far. Oh man, are you in? Is that a heavy bag in the corner? What's that in the corner right there?
That's a heavy bag that I don't hit very much anymore.
Yeah.
Because my shoulders don't like the heavy bag so much.
Okay.
And then of course Winston Churchill, which my dad gave me as a reminder of, kind of something to aspire for. Churchill is actually the name of my boxing gym. It's Churchill Boxing Club. So Winston Churchill has been an inspiration to me since I was a little kid, and my dad took me out to London and took me down to the War Museum, his underground bunkers. Have you been there in London?
Yeah, I've been there a couple times.
What a inspiration that place is.
Yep, that's incredible. When did he give you that picture?
That would have been early 90s.
Okay.
And my dad was a huge Winston Churchill fan. And, I think there's probably, at least 20 autobiographies of Churchill.
Oh, yeah.
And my dad had read all 20 of them and really was my dad was into all military history, but was in particular obsessed with Churchill and, kind of what England went through during World War II and how Churchill kind of held the line for so long solo.
Yeah.
Particularly when the U.S. was not coming in. So we're big Winston Churchill fans. And it's fun because, I have this boxing gym and we have fighters from, young kids from all around the world, from South America and Russia and different parts of Asia, all UK, Europe in general. And they come in and we inevitably give them a crash course in Winston Churchill. So they might not know much about U.S. history or really anything for that matter outside of boxing, but there are a bunch of now Winston Churchill experts and authorities on all things Churchill coming out of Churchill Boxing Club, which would make my dad very happy.
That is awesome. The first time I became aware of Winston Churchill, I think, through popular culture, watching The Winds of War with my parents back in the early 80s, that miniseries, and they do that voiceover, and it's him giving that speech, we'll fight on the beaches, we'll fight, doing that while they do like a bit of a montage, and I haven't watched it since then, but that stays in my mind all these years later. And then I read the book, the Herman Wouk book, after that a couple times. It's one of my most recommended books out there, Winds of War and War and Remembrance. But that's the first time I think I was about 9 when that came out. And I remember that speech being so powerful to an 8-year-old, 9-year-old, whatever I was at the time. And same, it left an impression, left a mark.
Think about Winston Churchill writing that speech in his bathtub with a glass of port. He used to do most of his best work in his bathtub. And so you can just imagine Churchill drinking port and writing these incredible speeches and basically sitting around thinking about how he was going to fuck Hitler, and in his bathtub. So
that's crazy.
I try to take baths also. Whenever I'm in the bath, I do so in honor of Winston Churchill. I don't drink port in the bath, though, I'll be honest. I don't really drink port.
Yeah, it's a tough one to get. You got to get accustomed to it, I guess, the port. Yeah.
I mean, if there's nothing else to drink, I'd be persuaded, but not my go-to.
I understand. I completely understand. A lot of creative people, showers, bathtubs, saunas, I think those are times, not necessarily because of the water, though there might be something to that, but I think it's just one of the times where no one's bugging you, no one's interrupting you.
Yeah, for sure. And whatever works. That's what I always tell a writer. If you can write, sitting in the middle of an intersection of a freeway right there. Yeah. If you can go to a funeral home and you get inspired writing in the waiting room of a funeral parlor right there, wherever it hits. Where do you like to write?
Well, it's been between like 10 at night and 3, 4 in the morning, because that's when no one's really bugging me. And here at the house in that upstairs area that we went to. So I don't think it was done when you were here, though. We might have been still working on it. But there's a library now with books in it. in there in that little upper part. So I write there primarily. But each book's been a little different because we were living in different places. When we got out here to Park City, I started going to the library, to these little rooms that you can rent or put your name down to reserve. But you only get in for 2 hours if someone else is waiting. So as soon as the high school got out, then I'd get bumped out of those rooms for some kid working on their history project. So that was the third and fourth books I did there. And then I started to talk about it in interviews. So people started to come and knock on the window and say hi and want to introduce themselves and that sort of a thing. So now it's here at the house up in that room that we went to.
See, I would like the 2-hour limit, because I'd be like, all right, good, I can leave. I did 2 hours, I'm getting out of here. Because 2 hours for me is about, that's usually what I say, 2, sometimes 3-hour bursts.
Interesting.
I tend to, I'd welcome that knock at 2 hours. I'd be like, thank you, I'm out.
Interesting. Well, with deadlines right now, my schedule is not organized in a way right now where I'm ahead of the game. It is just a constant sprint right now, but I'd like to get to that stage where I have structures and processes in place where I can write for a few 4 hours, 3 hours, whatever it might be, and then handle the business stuff or whatever else comes up, whatever meetings. Like today, right before this, it was calls about the next show and budgets and locations and above the line, below the line, all that stuff that I'm still kind of learning. So it was all of that intrudes on the writing day.
Have you been able to continue writing as your career as a film, television producer / writer, creator, as that's rising? Are you able to keep writing, and is that creative part of your mind still firing strong?
Oh yeah. I'm never going to run out of ideas. I never feel like the world keeps giving me too much as far as ideas go, for better or for worse. Better for me, worse for the world in general. But yeah, I love writing. I love locking that door and sitting in there and just starting with that blank page and just going and trying to create something that's going to be a great story for people to read.
God, I call that.
What do you call it?
You get to touch God. I find for people who've never been, for whatever reason, able to experience what that creative process feels like in the moment when it's just you alone with a vague idea, with a vague plan, and you have the courage to put your hands on that keyboard, and suddenly something starts to come to you. And to have that experience, to me, that's the closest thing to a true divine religious experience I've ever had, where 2 hours go by and you think it's been 15 minutes, and you stare at these things that have come out of your mind. And I was talking to Rogan about it. We were talking about what are ideas, and his theory is that they're almost entities, that they're beings that exist outside of ourselves. And that somehow, if we provide an opportunity for these entities, these creative little creatures to enter, things come out. And I don't know if that's true, but I don't know that it's not true.
Yeah, no, there's something to creating something out of whole cloth based off your experience in life up to that point. Every film you've watched, every book that you've read, every documentary you've watched, everything you studied in school, every relationship that you've had. And then all of those are a foundation that you're not really thinking about, but are part of your experience as you create something out of whole cloth.
I think about that. I think about the people that I come into contact with and how they inspire me, and how their parents inspired them, and how their great parents and great parents, and so you've got this sort of collection of spirits that can speak to us with every interaction that we're having. I find that if you can channel that through writing or anything really, but certainly through writing, maybe you've got some ghosts that are working in your advantage.
Yeah,
and I'll take a ghost or two. Give me a ghost.
Interesting that you say that. There's the ghosts is something I just wrote down yesterday on a yellow sticky. I have yellow stickies everywhere, and I wrote down ghosts.
Really? What
yesterday.
were you thinking?
Well, I don't want to give it away right now because it's going to come into play.
Hi, this is Jack Carr, and I wanted to talk about some of the weapons used in the pages of my Terminal List series. And wanted to start with why it was important for me to include SIG P226, also in its variant known as the Mark 25, in my first novel, Terminal List. And that is because I used this particular pistol right here on every deployment. So this is the 226 right here, Mark 25 variant, and it just fits my hand like a glove, like it was just built for it. I always carried this pistol on me. If I had to put down my long gun to go into a meeting or go somewhere where I wasn't supposed to be armed downrange in Iraq or Afghanistan or a couple other places around the world, then I always had SIG in a holster, concealed right there. And right here you can see there's a commemorative pistol that SIG has out this year for the 40th anniversary of the SIG P226. And this one right here is a commemorative edition that we did for the terminal list. You can see right there on the top, it says terminal list. It's just an important pistol to me, so it made sense to include in the novel, and it blows the conspiracy wide open. It's just one of those things that if you're not a gun guy, you just wouldn't understand. And in the TV show, you can see Chris Pratt and Taylor Kitsch starring as James Reese and Ben Edwards talking about this on the boat in episode 1, where the SIG P226 plays a major role.
I don't buy it, man. No way. Boozer offs himself with this SIG. No way.
Something you had to know about Boozer to understand. He would never have shot himself with a 9mm. An outsider, trying to make it look like a SEAL suicide, would find it convenient to use the same type of handgun that SEALs were issued. What they couldn't know was that Boozer was a real gun guy who'd grown up shooting competitively before he ever even thought about joining the Navy to become a frogman. Boozer had a love affair with custom 1911s chambered in .45 ACP, which most people just would not understand. Boozer hated the 9mm, and even though he had a SIG P226 in his collection to commemorate the pistol all SEALs had carried into combat since 9/11, his disdain for the smaller round was part of his identity. And that right there blows the conspiracy wide open in the terminal list.
Because it's going to come into play, not this book that I'm working on, but the next one. I think, but yeah, it's well, kind of like what you're saying, just not in the creative sense, just in the sense of a person who is going through an experience, and all of those entities from his past are a part of him as he makes decisions and solve problems going through whatever crucible that it is. So yeah, but that's crazy that you just said that, and I wrote that down on a yellow sticky yesterday.
I actually wear a quote from William Blake, the poet. Yeah. William Blake. I wear it on my neck, and I found it years ago, and it's helped me quite a bit, particularly with writing. And he says that the only thing pleasing to God is the creation of beautiful and exalted things. The only thing pleasing to God is the creation of beautiful and exalted things. And to me, it was the words pleasing, God, and creation. And to me, I found that when I was in the process of creating, whether I'm writing, whether I'm on a set, with actors and directing, and something's coming up, I would feel as though I was entering an alternate mindset state that felt so sublime and euphoric that it felt to me religious, pleasing to God. And that's something that I've carried with me, and literally around my neck for quite a while. And it's helped me. And whenever someone asks me about writing, I'm like, well, are you familiar with the quote from William Blake about what's pleasing to God? And sometimes they look at me like I'm insane. And other times they're like, that makes sense.
Wow, that's amazing. I wonder if that's because all your heart and soul is going in to every word, into every project. Just all of you is going into it. And I think a lot of people have a hard time channeling that because you're thinking there's so many other distractions out there. And today, once you put yourself out there, it's not like in the past, it would be, an actor on the screen. You're going to see that. But there's no way to tell that person you hate their performance, really, back in 1975, 85, 95, really, unless they choose to read a review in the newspaper or a magazine. They search it out. But today, with all the interaction, it is open season, and you are getting shot with arrows from every single direction. And it is very hard, especially if you're trying to engage and do things on the positive side, it's very hard to filter that out. And as a writer too, I think that comes into play. And I don't think about it at all. I think about the story, and I think about people who are going to trust me with time they're never going to get back, and to honor them and their decision to trust me with that time. Then all of my heart and soul is going into every single word going into this story, and I'm not worried about, is it going to displease someone? Is it going to please someone? Is it going to alienate someone? Who someone's going to say this? I don't think about any of that. It's all about the story, to honor those people who are trusting me with their time. But I can see, if one didn't look at it like that you could be very distracted by those arrows that are going to get slung, no matter how great or how horrible it is.
What I like to say to all these young filmmakers, writers, whomever is subjecting themselves to criticism, I actually think it's easier today with this insane, almost infinite amount of comment and response, because back in the day, when I started out, there were maybe 3 or 4 critics that would determine your fate, right? So they had such incredible power. When I did my first movie, it was a movie called Very Bad Things. When it came out, there were maybe 3 film critics that mattered at the time: Janet Maslin at the New York Times, Siskel and Ebert in Chicago, and this guy Ken Turan, who's at the LA Times. Those 4 people, and 2 of them were part of one organization, but thumbs up, thumbs down. For people that don't remember Siskel and Ebert, like, these guys had a thumbs up from Siskel and Ebert was everything. I mean, that was all you needed. So my first film came out. These guys had so much power. Very Bad Things. I got what I still maintain is the worst review any filmmaker has ever gotten in the history of reviews. You can look up Kenneth Turan, who's a very powerful film critic, review in the LA Times of Very Bad Things. I mean, he took a sledgehammer to my skull repeatedly. He didn't stop. He tried to destroy me, came very close. And I should say, as an aside, I've gotten what I believe to be the worst review that I've ever heard of. And whenever my friends get a bad review and they're depressed, I just show them that review and I'm like, grow up, puffing the fuck up. Okay. Resiliency, man. But I got that. And then when I did Friday Night Lights, the TV show, I got what I believe to be the best review I've ever read. So from the New York Times. Wow. So I've experienced both of them. And I remember the power that these critics used to have because there were so few of them. Now, yeah, sure, you open up your social media and you go on X and you start feeling the power of instant response. But there's so much of it that, to me, it's very hard for any of it to stick, the good or the bad, because there's so much. But back in the day, oh my goodness, these 3 or 4 critics could run you out of town. And fortunately, Siskel and Ebert came to my rescue. But man, I was like this close because of Ken Turan to being done.
Wow. That's crazy. I'm going to think about it that way going forward. I like that. I hadn't been thinking of it in those terms before. It's essentially like there were kingmakers out there.
Oh my God. They to the point where people would, think about threatening them, bribing them. You heard about like payola in the music business. If you were Ken Turan or Janet Maslin or A.O. Scott, who was another big critic, I mean, a film studio had a $150 million movie about to come out, and they knew what the power. You don't think those guys were getting phone calls, and those guys were having deals put in front of them? Guaranteed.
Wow.
That's an unreported conspiracy theory, because everyone talks about payola in the music business, right? Pay for play. You know about that, right?
No, but I can infer by what you're saying.
A huge scandal, back in the 80s and 90s when radio mattered, and these record executives would pay prominent radio disc jockeys and the guys that set the playlist thousands and thousands of dollars to get music on the radio. That was just straight pay for play. I know what happened in the film business too with critics.
Interesting. Oh wow, that's a movie right there. That's a miniseries right there.
It's an unreported conspiracy.
Yeah, I wonder what the most outrageous thing any one of them was ever offered, whether they took it or not. But an offer had to come in either directly or indirectly.
No question.
Yeah, I wonder what the most outrageous thing they were offered, and if it swayed one way or another.
It's just a number, man. At the end of the day, it's just a number.
Yeah.
And so the question is, how big of a number and how much did they have to pay?
Interesting.
But if you can just imagine, and you're sitting there as the president of the studio, and your career is on the line with the $200 million film that you guys have worked on for 5 years, and it's going to come down to 5 critics, sitting around their living room after seeing your movie and their computer.
Wow.
You're gonna make an effort.
Yeah. Interesting.
You're gonna reach out and touch somebody, Jack Carr. You would.
Oh man, I don't know. Wow. Those days might be behind me. But yeah, I'll keep it pure. I'll keep it pure and let it stand on its own.
That's the other side, there's so much response and reaction that we're exposed to, really almost unlimited, infinite, that to me it's I truly don't feel it. Certainly not the way back in the day those reviews could hit. And any filmmaker who says they don't care about reviews or don't read reviews, they're lying.
Wow.
They're lying.
That is so interesting.
Particularly back in the day.
Yeah. And were you coming right off of Chicago Hope when you did that first film?
Yep, I was doing Chicago Hope. Basically, I was an actor in Chicago Hope. The show was getting pretty popular. And I realized that if I wasn't careful, my legacy was going to be being a TV doctor on a decent medical drama. And I was on a plane flying to New York. My character's name was Billy Kronk. And I was, when you're on a TV show, and back then Chicago was popular, people just come up to you and they call you by your character's name and they start talking to you like you're your character. And that happened to me. My character's name was Billy. And hey, Billy, what's up, Billy? Hey, everything, Billy. And I'm starting to freak out. I'm on the plane, I'm sitting in my seat, and people are walking by. And this guy walks by me and looks at me. And he stops. He goes, hey, Billy, my wife has this weird rash on her elbow. Would you take a look? Show him. And she takes her elbow and sticks it in my face, and there was a big rash on it. And I'm like, yeah, I got to get out of this shit. I got to make a change.
That's wild.
And that was part of what drove me to start, thinking about a career outside of acting. And I love acting and still do, and I love actors, and I think it's a really amazing process, and great actors are artists, but I was determined not to be, Dr. Billy for the rest of my life.
Wow.
So I thank whoever that was, whoever the wife was with the bad elbow rash. Thank you.
Wow. Did you just say penicillin? I mean, that's kind of a good blanket one, as long as they're not allergic.
I wish I had.
Amoxicillin to be safe.
I think it was like I just froze in this deep conviction that this must be no longer. That I must figure out something else to do with myself.
Yeah. Wow. And you directed a couple episodes on Chicago Hope as well, right? Yeah. So you got a taste for it.
Yep. So the first episode I directed, when you're directing back then, especially directing episodes of TV, sounds probably better than it was. You really were just a guy to sit there and say action and cut. The show just kind of runs itself to a degree, especially we were doing 28 episodes a season.
That's amazing.
So the crew was, very much kind of in process, and they knew what they were doing, and you kind of knew how things were going to get shot. And the actors weren't going to really take much from you because they'd been playing these characters for a couple of years. So if you came up to them and were like, hey, I got some ideas, they're like, dude, I'm good.
They're like, all right, Billy.
So yeah, basically. And so the directors were just sort of hired guns to just get it over with. And then you knew you weren't going to really get to edit much anyway. And so yet everyone wants to direct because it's really still an amazing thing. And it is a way to get started. So I'm not trying to belittle it too much, a little bit. If you get caught in that rut, particularly back then, you were never going to get out of it. Just being like, a mid-level TV director and, It's fine, respect. But they evidently had an episode that everyone thought was so bad that no one would direct it. And it was sort of a not kind of fully realized script. And do you know who Ricardo Montalban was?
Yeah, of course.
Fantasy Island.
Yeah.
This actor who was like a big sex symbol back in like the 40s. And he was on Fantasy Island, and he was famous for saying rich Corinthian leather. And he was, maybe not perceived with the highest level of artistic integrity at the time. And one of the actors in the show was friends with him, and evidently he wasn't that well physically, and the actor was friends had called in a favor, and it was going to be this big two-hander between the actor on the show and Ricardo Montalban. Nobody wanted to go near it. The scripts weren't really good. It felt like it might be kind of corny. And so they were like, Pete, you're up. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And Ricardo Montalban showed up on set, and he was older. He was in his late 80s. He was in a wheelchair. And nobody was belittling him, but, people were kind of a little bit rolling their eyes like, wow, this is going to be kind of ridiculous. Like, we're going to, sort of stumble through this show, this episode with this actor who's, long past his prime and is doing car commercials, and kind of like, what are we doing here? And I felt a little bit of that, but put it all aside. And for 8 days, we shot Ricardo Montalban in a hospital bed. He played a dying ex-Vietnam veteran who one of the doctors in our hospital knew. And so they were sort of, having this final moment before Ricardo's character died. And the idea was, I think, quite emotional. And, after day 3 or 4, something weird happened, and people just started getting caught up. And Ricardo Montalban started acting his balls off. And it was this deeply emotional episode between Hector Elizondo, was the actor who knew him, great actor, and Ricardo. And by the end of it, after 7 days, everybody had bought into this, and it was time for Ricardo to wrap. And he got up and he stopped and he asked for the crew to come in. And he told us that he was dying. He had thought maybe another month to live. And this was the last job of his career. And he wanted to thank all of us. And I choke up right now remembering that. And everybody was crying, and everybody, incredible applause. And he left, and he passed away shortly after, and it was his last job. It ended up being, something that, an incredible example of something you don't think is going to have an outcome that might work to your, in a way that is additive, was so additive, and I'll never forget it. Wow. And it's taught me to never try and judge or anticipate anything that I hear. Generally in life, I try to be open-minded, but particularly in our business, because that moment in directing that episode was an incredibly educational experience to me, and still to this day, one of my proudest moments. And nobody wanted to go near that.
Wow, I'm gonna remember that one. That's incredible.
Yeah. So you never know, man.
Never know. Wow, amazing. And did you always have the acting bug from an early age? Because I know you did study it in college, and then did you do the pack up the Civic and drive out to California type thing, or after college? What was that like?
Yeah, I sort of did. I remember when I was in high school, there was a school play. I think it was Pippin. And my friend Peter Shaw, I didn't do theater. I didn't, I never did any of it, but I secretly would watch the plays, and I thought they were kind of cool, and I liked it. And I thought that there was something interesting in theater. And as a kid, my parents used to take me to a lot of Broadway shows, and I really have, very, very fond memories of my time. And I still go to Broadway plays all the time. I still go to theater all the time whenever I can. But my friend Peter Shaw ended up getting this little part in Pippin. And I remember going to see it, and Peter Shaw came out, and this motherfucker got to be in a play. And I was so jealous. And I would like, and I really never looked back after Peter Shaw got to be a Pippin. And I think I was in ninth grade. Um, and he lit a little fire that really never went out. And so when I went to college, I started getting more into it. And I went to school in Minnesota, in St. Paul, Minnesota, this small little liberal arts school that had a really shitty theater department. And so they needed bodies. So I had a little interest, and then McAllister College kind of just was, they needed literally people to be in the course. So I started pulling me in, and then I just started getting into it. And I started, finding in real energy to stay up late and work hard and study and direct plays and write plays and act in them. And that led to little films. And we didn't have a film department in our school, but there were some other schools nearby that offered little film programs. So we would make short films and all this stuff. And my dad, who was in advertising business, like Mad Men kind of stuff, in New York, thought I was insane. And when I was ready to graduate, he told me that he had got me a job at Lehman Brothers, working on a desk. And you're welcome. And I had to look him in the eye and say, Dad, I'm going to LA. And he looked at me, so what do you tell me? I said, I'm going to go see what's going on in LA and see what the film business is. And my dad, who I loved deeply, looked me in the eye, and this was his parting advice to me. He said, well, okay, son, you know what's going to happen? You're going to end up shooting them gay pornos. I said, what? He said, you heard me. And I said, okay, well, thanks, Dad. And in the back of my mind, and maybe still to this day, part of what drives me is that sort of cautionary warning that my dad laid on me a few hours before I left for LA. It's still there, Jack.
Oh man, that is so wild. And you get out there, and then do you start auditioning right away, or do you do the assistant thing for a bit?
No, so I started working as an production assistant. I got out there and I was beg, borrow, or steal, and it was a different world out then, and you just would be part of like these gypsy groups of guys. I had a whole group of like 7 guys, and we'd hear about a movie and we'd go down there and talk our way in for, $150 a week. You would like clean up any mess there was. Mm-hmm. Anything that come out of a human body, you would clean up. Any problem, any coffee run, the shittiest of the shit jobs. And I did them over and over again. Including, one of my first films was a movie, Keanu Reeves, it was one of his first movies. It's called The Night Before. And I was the lowest PA on the film, which meant I had to guard the parking lot where those honey wagon trailers were.
Oh, yeah.
And those, for anyone who doesn't know, a honey wagon, they're like little prison cells that the lower actors on the set get to go in. It's literally a prison cell with a toilet and a cot, and they call them honey wagons because they do not smell like honey, right? They're just disgusting vehicles. And you put 10 actors in them, and my job would be to be in the deep back guarding the honey wagon. And we were doing this concert scene in a bar, and there was a musician, George Clinton, who's a great funk musician, Bootsy Collins and the Parmadelic Funk. I'm saying it wrong. George Clinton and his funk band. They were the band, and they took over the honey wagon for the time I was out there. And these guys were partying and coming in and out, and girls coming in and out, and music and a lot of weed, and like it was just a party, and they were going back and forth and sitting partying. And George Clinton came back to the honey wagon, walked in, started screaming and yelling. I was just the quiet guy in the back, standing there with my walkie-talkie. I never talked to anyone. And George Clinton starts throwing a fit, and he comes screaming out. He goes, "Somebody stole my money! Somebody stole my money!" And he had demanded his payment up front, a cashier check, right? So like a $15,000 check, and it was gone. And she's like, "We're not shooting until I get my money." So every production stops, and the producers and the AD, piano, everyone's out there, and he's like, "I know who took my money, that boy," and he points at me. No. And I'm just standing there, and they're like, He's like, you got my money. You've been out here the whole time. I've seen, and I'm like, and they come up to me, the producer and AD, like, do you have, I don't have the money. They're like, Pete, did you somehow, I go, I didn't take the money. And they figure the only one that went into the honey wagon was the driver who emptied the garbage. So suddenly all eyes go to this big dumpster in downtown LA, full, overflowing with garbage. And they're like, it's in there.
Oh.
Pete, you got to go in.
Oh.
They cover me with garbage bags.
Oh.
And I'm in the dumpster and they're all staring at me and I'm rummaging through it. George Clinton's like, just give me the money, man. You know you got it. You know you got it. And I'm digging through all this shit. George Clinton somehow puts his hand in his back pocket and realizes he had the check. Pulls it out. He goes, my bad.
Oh.
That's how I started.
Oh, my God.
Those were the good times, too.
Yeah. You always say in SEAL teams, it's like when you lose something, you don't find it until you're like, who stole my whatever it is? And then that's when you find it either in your bag, in your locker, in whatever it might be. But you don't find it until you say, who stole my, oh, there it is.
It's probably interesting now. Like, do you look back at Buds and the early days of being a new guy and think those were kind of the good days? Like, as shitty as they were, do you think that or not? I mean, obviously so much is going right for you, but
yeah, I mean, it's, I look at every place that I've been thus far in life. I mean, for the most part, I feel like that's where I was supposed to be. Thus far, except for some admin stuff at the end. I'm not a very good admin type person. It was time to move on after my last deployment to Iraq, where it was the last time I'd be tactically maneuvering guys on the battlefield. It was very clear to me that it was time to get out and write, pursue that next dream. But yeah, I look back on those days. Actually, I look back on them quite frequently because it's late 90s. You're showing up at a SEAL team. You have all the Vietnam books and movies in your head. You think you're going to get the secret mission right out of the gate. As soon as you walk across that quarterdeck, you're going to get issued that pager, and you're going to go to the Golden Connex box, get this all amazing gear, and you're going to go save the princess and get back in time for beers at the bar type thing. That's what you think. And then you show up there and it's like, hey, new guy, clean the bathroom, change out the light bulb, paint that wall, take out the trash, do new guy stuff, do PA stuff essentially. But those were great days.
Remember your Hell Week?
I remember it as much as one can all these years later, 20 plus years later now. But I just remember the biggest thing I remember, the darkness, the cold, of course, but also I remember people quitting in droves. And I remember thinking the program is working, because I'd done so much research up to that point in my life. Since 7 years old, I'd wanted to do this. And I knew that 80% of the people were going to quit. And so this is the crucible. This is why I think so many people are drawn to Marine Corps boot camp or Ranger School or Army SF or military in general, or something that tests them at that age, let's say between age 15 and 20 or somewhere in there. You're just drawn by DNA, something inside you to test yourself, to prove yourself to the tribe, prove yourself to the community, prove yourself, to yourself. And so I remember people quitting in droves and thinking, this is working. And some people would yell, like in that surf zone where you're all, you know how it is, you're linked arms and all that stuff. And people would say, come back. And I was always like, come back. Like, hey, this is the program working. That person that's walking up that beach or running up that beach to ring the bell, it's at that point in the back of the trailer hitch on a truck. I'm like, oh yeah. So I do remember that sticks out.
Did you ever think of quitting during the Hell Week? Did you come close? Did you have a moment?
People always say that if you say that you didn't think about quitting, that you're lying. But I mean, you're always thinking about it because it's this thing. That's why you're there. So thinking about quitting isn't the same as I'm about to quit, if that makes sense. You know that conceptually it's there and it's very easy to do by ringing this bell. And that's the whole reason you're there, is to test yourself. And so for me, I always just thought, well, I'm going to die here or I'm going to make it. And that's it. My whole life I've been doing this. Plus I've been telling everybody since I was 7 years old that I'm going to be a SEAL, and I can't very well go back home and tell them that I didn't make it at this point. And I also thought, I put it in perspective. And I think this is where reading and history and educating yourself comes into play, because I realized that I'm not storming a beach at Normandy. I'm not storming a beach at Iwo Jima. I am here on a beach in Coronado, California, testing myself, essentially living my dream. I have this opportunity to test myself. I've been wanting to do this my whole life. And all those people from the inception of this country up until today sacrificed so much for me to be able to have this dream, I can do a couple more push-ups here in the sand. I can keep running. I can do this. This is so I thought of it in relative terms, and I think that certainly helped.
That's so genius. And I mean, that kind of thinking is applicable to anything, right? Like, we tend to feel so sorry for ourselves and underestimate what we're capable of doing. But to think about Normandy or Okinawa and what people are actually capable of doing.
Yeah.
Really, really extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, I had a bunch more questions for you, but this actually leads exactly into your current project.
Yeah.
Outstanding, by the way. I was going to text you last night. I finished it. I watched all 6 episodes. Did 2 on Sunday, 2 on Monday, 2 last night. So my wife and I watched it together. Absolutely incredible. Outstanding. You are engaged every single second of this miniseries. It is, I think it's going to go down as one of the greatest Westerns. It is not just Westerns, but just filmmaking, television in general. It is so good. And it leads right into this because my wife and I are watching it together, and you're
talking about American Primeval.
Yes, which is coming out the week this drops. And we're just engaged in every single second of every single episode. And you're almost tense watching it because you're so engaged. And this leads into it because I kept looking at my wife and thinking, what did we complain about earlier in the day?
Yeah.
Did one of the stovetops not malfunction or something like that? And you're watching what these people went through as they're going across these prairies, especially in this, you're focused on Utah, Wyoming area right here, the promise of a California perhaps in the distance. And you're seeing what these people had to do to survive. And it is incredible, absolutely incredible. So what we're just talking about putting things in perspective, I think popular culture can help with that, because certainly it wasn't just the books that I read on World War II and the Civil War and Revolutionary War and whatever I was reading growing up. It was popular culture. It was all those films that I watched about those things that are stories, someone's personal experience, a story told in that time and place. So all of that's part of my experience on the beach in Buds when I'm putting this crucible in relative terms, and that's popular culture, which is what this is and what you created. It's incredible what you created with American Primeval.
Appreciate it. And that one of the elements that Mark L. Smith, who's really a great writer, and I wanted to explore was just quite simply what does it mean to know that if you're sleeping in a campsite and you need to go take a leak 50 yards away, there might be 11 real problems you could have on that 50-yard walk to take a pee, and 10 of them could kill you.
Yeah.
Just going to the bathroom was potentially putting your life at grave risk. Certainly something like a tooth infection or a broken ankle could lead to so many complications. And we wanted, as part of the experience of Primeval, to try and help an audience understand just how challenging and dangerous life was from pretty much every direction. Back at that moment in time, 1857, not far from where you are right now.
Yeah, right here.
Where civilization had, as Shea Wiggum says, civilized and civilization are two different words entirely.
Yep.
America was not secure or safe at that region at that point in time. That's for damn sure.
Oh, it's great. He was so great, though, as Jim Bridger. Oh, my. Everybody was so great in this. I was just texting Taylor earlier, and I said, I was just blown away by this performance. I know how much it meant to him.
It meant so much. He worked so hard, and really proud of, I'm always proud of Taylor, and he really takes it seriously, going back to talking about acting as a craft, and when done right, it's an art form, and, Kitsch really possesses those skills. So I'm super proud of him and the work he did. And Betty Gilpin also.
Oh my gosh, incredible.
They were a great team, and I think they played off each other so well.
So great.
And have different styles. And two people, when they first got together on the set, I wasn't sure how these two kind of felt a little oil and vinegary, and I'm not sure this was going to work. And, Kitsch, who's got kind of zero compromise in him, was pure Kitsch and sort of put it out there like almost as a challenge, like, this is who I am. Can you deal with it? Can you? And she's like, I have no problem dealing with that. And I will raise you three.
Nice.
And so it was kind of like, I don't know, the two of them had a really great dynamic. And
Oh,
God, because man, we were up there in the mountains for 140 days, and no sound stages, and no safety net from much of it.
yeah, I was going to ask you about that too. Was this it? From watching it, it certainly seems like a challenging shoot. The environmentals, what all the actors had to go through. I mean, they looked like they were living back in that time. It was, I mean, it was astounding. I mean, you were there with them because of how they looked, and then everybody brought their A game. They were all outstanding. Was it one of the more challenging shoots you had to do? I mean, you have horses, you have firearms, you have arrows flying, there is brutal violence, but it's done in this way that moves the story forward. And it's just, it's incredible. But was it a challenging shoot?
I'm always hesitant when people talk about the filmmaking process as being, a challenging job, because, what dangerous jobs really are. And there are plenty of them, right? There are lots of people that have very challenging and dangerous jobs. And I don't put us above or below any of them, because making films is dangerous. And I've seen people get hurt and die on film sets, and it's horrible. That being said, American Primeval was by far the most challenging experience I ever had. And I've had some pretty challenging logistical films. But, starting with, the goal was no sound stages and be in the location and go out into it. So as a result, we would go, drive minimum hour from Santa Fe every day to one of a couple of different reservations, drive 20 minutes up into the reservation to a base camp. And we're talking about, 250 member crew and usually 100 cast members with 200 horses, with extra horses, and, sets that were built far away from the base camp. So everybody would get to base camp, and you'd have a couple of hundred people have to get ready. And for the actors, the makeup and the wardrobe is very, we spent a lot of time trying to get that as right as possible. A bunch of Native American consultants who were all there at 4 a.m, trying to get everybody ready so they could get up on the mountain to where our set was, where there's a whole nother group of us waiting, and we'd get everybody in position, and we'd all be set to go. And then the storm would come in, and everybody would have to get out and go all the way to the base camp. And then literally this would happen over and over. And we would come back up and we'd restart it. And then suddenly the lightning would be too close, so we'd have to all go back down. And this would go on. And I've never seen, these are the horses and the background and the fires and the teepees and all, and everything would have to be shut down and restart and shut down. I've never seen a crew work like this tirelessly with a smile and with, the sense of, wow, this is an adventure. This is a test. And it was an interesting example of how people oftentimes, if you give them the opportunity to work really hard, they will, and they'll like it, and they'll get proud of it. And I don't know, it was a really cool experience. So the whole movie, the series and the experience of shooting it was definitely an adventure and a really good one.
Yeah, you can tell that by watching it, that it's not a soundstage. You can tell that that these guys are in these situations, and that's real water, and it's cold, and it looks like they're hurt when they're hurt. It's fantastic, absolutely incredible.
Kind of like be careful what you ask for, because when we were starting this with Netflix, I was, very definitive, and I don't want to go to sound stages. I don't want this to be real, and I don't want this to. And you were like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Of course I'm sure. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to go." And they're like, "You're really sure?" I go, "Yes." So I'm like, okay. And after day 90 of the blizzards, and we'd have rattlesnake wranglers that were constantly moving through, and they would find 4 or 5 a day and have to pull them out of rocks. And these were the little ones.
Oh yeah.
And the little ones are, about them. They're the dangerous ones. And I remember one day sitting with Kitsch and JJ, Kitsch's stunt double, who I think you probably know, from Terminal List, I think. But JJ and we're all sitting there on top of a mountain and we're freezing. We're trying to change the hand warmers, but all the hand warmers are dead. Those little pouches that you use. And Kitsch is like, whose idea was this? Like, what was I thinking, man? But at the end of the day, it going through that kind of experience, you hope obviously people respond well and that it's good and people like it. But what they can never take from you is the experience. And I had a great time up on the mountain doing American Primeval.
Man, that's so wild. And did you know that you wanted to do a Western as you started down this path, directing and started working your way through these different movies and different types of movies and military and sport, and all these different ones that you're doing? Is Western on the list?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to do something in that period. I felt like it would be a challenge. I've really never done a period piece. And I was kind of thinking about Jeremiah Johnson and, the film that Robert Redford made back in the 70s, which was one of the early films that my dad took me to.
Nice.
That probably was, in a way, responsible for the warning he finally gave me when I told him I was going to Hollywood. Because I thought that movie just I'm sure you loved it.
Yeah. Filmed a lot of it right down here, right down the road.
Oh my God, such a great movie. And I'd seen Westerns and, my dad also exposed me to films like, I think The Cowboys with John Wayne, where John Wayne was killed by Bruce Dern, was one of the first Westerns I ever remember seeing. But I did like Westerns. I love Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And, these are films that were definitely, in my kind of, memory banks. But it was Jeremiah Johnson that I was thinking about when we started putting Friday Night, Jesus, I can't lie about that.
American Primeval.
American Primeval together. And I remember, and I'll show it to you. Hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on. When Mark L. Smith, who's a great writer, came to my office, I said, I got an idea for a show. He said, what? And I gave him this.
Nice. There you go.
I put this in his lap. And I said, hey, man.
Got one right here.
I said, can you write this?
Dude.
Let's do a show that is this, right?
Nice. Love it.
You can ask him. And I just put it in his lap. I said, don't say anything. Think about it. And he called me back a couple days later and he said, let's do it.
Nice.
And, we worked together, but Mark really created the template for what American Primeval is. Super talented guy. And I don't know whether, I guess it's a Western-ish, but it feels like it's something a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I credit, this Ice Axe and Jeremiah Johnson as being at the core of the inspiration.
Oh, man. God.
And we both were interested in Brigham Young and the story of how the Mormons, came to be in Salt Lake City, and in sort of an unreported, very violent history that, is in many ways justified. It's like you're not paranoid if everyone's really trying to get you. And the Mormons at that point were paranoid, and they had been gotten in the East Coast. And, Joseph Smith was killed in Illinois, and Brigham Young led these Mormons on foot across the plains to Salt Lake City, which at the time was maybe one of the most desolate shitholes on earth, with just this dead lake and nothing. And Brigham Young said, well, this is the place. Literally, he said, this is the place. And they were like, really? And he said, yes, we will make our last stand here. And part of that last stand involved his militia, the Nauvoo Legion, and they were violent. And we were sort of getting into that and doing a bunch of research, and we thought that was really just an interesting, untold part of American history.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that. Well, as I'm watching it with my wife, I'm thinking, gosh, we should do it. We live here. We should probably do a little more research into what built this place up.
Have you ever been to the This Is the Place Memorial in just north of Salt Lake? I mean, it's probably 45 minutes from where you are right now. It's fascinating. It's got like they have a recreation world where people dress up like Mormons in 1850s, and there's a big monument called This Is the Place, where Brigham Young was alleged to have come over the hill half of them had died. They were refugees and stood on this hill overlooking the Salt Lake Basin. And he said, this is the place. So it's literally, they call the memorial that this is the place. You should definitely check it out.
I will. And do you think there's going to be pushback from, I don't know, Mormon community or showing what you showed? Or is it just, hey, this is a story set in this time and this part is historically accurate? Or
we focus on an incident that's been called the Mormon Meadows Massacre, which was a very, very violent mass killing that occurred in 1857, southern Utah, where a group of Nauvoo Legion, that's a Mormon army, dressed up as Shoshone Indians, and with a few members of another tribe out in front, they killed about 165 pioneers on the way to California from Arkansas. And they sort of tried to blame it on the Indians. And we wanted to tell this story. And there was a book called Massacre written about it, read the book. The author is a Mormon, reached out to him. I said, would you talk to me? He said, I'll talk to you and I'll take you out to the Meadows Massacre Memorial, which is also near you, a little further. It's in southern Utah. But as long as you're willing to listen and understand how it happened. And I said, sure. And I went out there with them and spent a day touring it. And it was a mass murder. It was a crime. And I believe Brigham Young knew all about it and sort of let it happen. And he said, yeah, we did it. We own it. But you got to at least understand how we got to a point where we felt, some members of this church felt it in our best interest to commit this act of murder. And I heard him, and I understand why, no justification, guilty, but I thought it was worth at least trying to offer kind of some historical context for what got the Mormons to the point in 1857 where they were that violent.
Yeah, man. And speaking of violence, how did you do that? How did you, that first scene, and we're not giving away too much, it's right near the beginning. I don't want to give away too much, but man, that scene, wow. How did you do that?
Well, I think, it started with kind of, I think that for any action scene to have, a weight, there's got to be an emotional component. You have to have an idea of, what you want the audience to feel. Even if it's John Wick and you just want the audience to be like, oh, that's fucking awesome. Great. That, what you want. And action without some sort of strategy going into it, for me, doesn't, hit quite as hard. So the first thing I thought I had was, we know we're going to have this very violent, riotous massacre, this moment, probably that would have lasted for 90 seconds of real terror. If I was to imagine how long, 90 seconds is a fairly long amount of time. But I'm thinking, okay, well, it's 90 seconds of terror that this would have lasted. And, rather than sort of sit back and watch the violence unfold from different perspectives, what if we try and stay as close to our main character, in this case, it's a woman and her son, and try and give the audience an idea of what that experience would be like for two people, just in totality, from beginning to end. So that was sort of the strategy. And then it was what if we could design one continuous experience? And then the crew starts getting excited because that's a challenge. And what do you mean? Well, we're going to have a 90-second shot? Well, yeah, but what if we start the shot 90 seconds before and we carry it 90 seconds after, right? So you want a 7-minute shot total? Yeah, maybe. I get excited about it. So then you start figuring out how could you have a 7-minute continual shot? And then you're like, well, what if it happened at sunset? So the sun is always in the same spot. So it's got this kind of epic look to it. Well, that would mean we'd have to shoot it over 8 days, and we could only shoot for an hour and 15 minutes a day. Well, so it becomes a series of logistic and technical challenges. And then everybody sort of gets on board. And of course, Netflix and all the studios starts calling, being like, what? And you have to sort of, don't worry about it. We got it. And they're like, but really? And this, fortunately, was early on. So, I'm like, yes, I was lying. I had no idea whether I'd be able to do it. But everybody from, ADs to cinematographers to stunts to the actors, to everybody kind of had to lock in we filmed it over 4 days. But the 4 days when we would rehearse it, the sequences that we're going to shoot, and then you'd have an hour and a half of light, so you had to be perfect. You maybe got 2 takes.
Wow.
And then we'd collect all these different takes, and then we would stitch them together, and pretty cool.
Wow. Did you do that previs type stuff and do the music and all that?
We started in my office in Santa Fe with toy soldiers. It started with me and a couple guys in a room, and it grew to me and 30 people with these toy soldiers. Then we videoed the toy soldiers. Then we went out to the set with like cardboard boxes, and we started walking through it, videoing the rehearsals with crew members just to start getting an idea. And then as we got closer, we bring stunts in, and then we have and we film the stunt rehearsal. So a really cool rehearsal. And the cameramen, it's all handheld, so the cameramen are passing cameras off to each other, and it was really fun. And it became like a really good challenge, filmmaking challenge. And it ended up being a really good scene, which hundreds of people contributed to. So it was satisfying, and it's fun to watch people go home after 13 hours of shooting with a big smile on their face, like excited to come back the next day. And that's for anyone that's worked on movie sets a lot, that doesn't always happen.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that was
cool.
It's a visceral. It's so people need to watch it to experience what this is and know exactly what we're talking about.
Funny, man, because you do it and you just like, for me, I look at it and I'm like, I wish we'd done more. I wish we'd added 5 more. And I just sit there, I'm like, yeah, it's good, but what if we had done this? Had it done. I still call that stunt guys. I'm like, we sit there like, shut up, stop. Stop, it's good. And then they'll call me 2 days later and they'll be like, no, what we should have done. And I'm like, you got to stop.
Have you done that with other movies in the past? And like, what we should have done. You're always. Yeah.
You always think you've gone far enough, but then you watch it and like, we should just went a little further. So one of the things I admire so much about John Wick, there's no way those guys can say they should have gone a little further. And I respect that so much. It's like, if you're going to do that, do it.
Do it. Yeah. Oh man, I love that. And this scene obviously stands out because it's early on, but then every episode has something where there's just this visceral, just smashing together of like human bodies in combat, and you feel like you're there. You're on. Very rarely these days do, especially when I'm watching things at home and not in a theater where everything sounds great and everything the rest. You're flinching in this. In every episode, something happens where you're like, oh my gosh, which I love. I love when I'm watching something and I say, no way, I can't believe they did that. Incredible. Or you're so engaged in it, you're actually physically flinching, because like when you see Taylor and these guys like hit each other in hand-to-hand combat, and you have tomahawks and you have knives and you just have it's friggin' visceral and it's brutal and it's not just on a street or a parking garage. I mean, there's snow and there's rocks and there's trees and there's it's just arrows. It's just
Thousand rivers.
Wow. You're nervous throughout a little bit for like, and especially knowing Taylor and my wife were like worried for him.
We were doing one of those fights and we were doing it where the one she's showing you leaps off a cliff.
That is crazy, but he has a tomahawk.
Well, it was supposed to end kind of right by this riverbed. It was maybe 15 degrees out where we're filming that, snow everywhere. And the fight's going, and I'm just staring at that water, right? I'm like, what if it was? And the line producer came and was like, no, there's no way. And I'm like, and then JJ, the sun guys, comes up, and we're looking at the river, and he goes, I know, wouldn't it be great? I go, yeah. And then the safety guy, we always had to have a safety guy, like, it's too cold, you can't do it. I'm like, well, wait a minute, I ice bath every morning. Every morning I ice bath. I think they could fight through it. He goes, it's too cold. I go, it's not. Pull up my jacket, take off my jacket, pull up my sleeve, stick my arm in. It is fucking cold. It's maybe 28 degrees, moving. I pull my arm out. I'm like, it's too cold. JJ puts his arm and he goes, it's not too cold. We're going to do one pass. He brings the other stunt guy. They're like, we'll fight in the river. We'll just fight through it. I'm like, and now we come down, everybody's fired up. These two fuckers, they were so hard. They fucking fight into the river. You can see it. They go down, they go in, they're beating the shit out of each other through this frozen water. They get to the end. The other stunt guy has passed out from the cold. He's out. And JJ just starts slapping him. You gotta wake up, buddy. You gotta wake up. He slaps him till the guy wakes up. The guy wakes up, looks around, and they finished fighting. And they kept going in one take.
Wow.
And those guys.
Wow, that is awesome. Yeah, that jump off that cliff with that tomahawk in hand is just awesome.
Those are just bodies hitting bodies, and that was part of the ethos of our show is like everything must have hurt. If you were on a wagon moving 20 miles across the country and you had a bad back, can you imagine the compression on your discs of this for 3 weeks? Just the bumping of the wagons was an impact sport.
Man. And I couldn't tell that any of these people were stunt people. I couldn't tell. And I was looking because I'm always wondering like which actors can ride horses and make it look real and that sort of a thing. I don't know much about that, but I know a little bit, enough to be dangerous, I guess. But it looked like you couldn't tell it was some other than Taylor doing all of these stunts. You couldn't tell it was anybody else. Like, I don't know the way you guys did it. There is no place where I feel like I could have paused something and been like, yeah, see, that's not Taylor. Like he is crushing this thing.
Yeah, Taylor learned how to ride well. He knew how to ride, but he learned how to ride really well. All the actors, one of the first questions I asked everyone, a crew member and cast member before I hire them is, how's your body for this shoot? How are your ankles, how are your hips, how are your knees, how's your neck? Like, are you up for this? And some people said no, because it's not an easy show for the crew. Yeah. And with the actors, and actors will all lie about everything. Can you ride? Of course. No. Can you really ride? Of course. Okay, prove it. We'll put them on a horse. You can't trust, with all due respect to actors, they will lie and tell you they can do anything. I remember when I was doing Friday Night Lights, I found one of my actors who told me he played high school football, reading Football for Dummies in the lobby of our hotel.
He's just brushing up on it.
I'm like, really? It's like, I lied, man. I wanted the part. But they all could ride really well.
Yeah. It looks so good. Everything looks so good. And it also looks so dangerous for them as actors. You're just watching this, you're like, oh my gosh, that's what it looks like, which makes you feel viscerally connected to this show. It's awesome. And poor Taylor had to go right from this right into Dark Wolf.
Yeah, we broke his foot, and then you guys concussed him.
Yeah, he got beat up in both of these shows, and people, when they see this and then they watch Dark Wolf, they'll be able to see Taylor's year and how he just goes from this one to the other, where he just takes a beating. But it's similar in both shows. I was thinking, like, wait, this guy's taking a beating, but what I loved about shows growing up, like, say, Raiders of the Lost Ark. First, you see Indiana Jones in that first one, just beat up throughout this whole thing. But as a kid, you're watching that and you're like, resilience. Look, this guy takes a beating every time he gets up and he keeps going. Look, and now he's standing on a submarine, figuring out how to get on it in this one scene. And then, the spirits are coming out of it. I love that. I love when people take a beating and keep moving forward. People love Rocky, keeps getting hit and keeps getting up, keeps moving forward. And Taylor does it in this. Taylor does it in Dark Wolf. And he took some hits in both.
Yeah, I remember Kitsch's last day on the set was his final scene in the movie, which is a pretty heavy scene. Mm-hmm. And he was done. He had been through it on this show, physically and emotionally. He really put a lot into it. And I remember us saying goodbye to him. And he looked like he'd been through it, and I give him a hug. And I said, all right, go have a vacation. He goes, I'm going right into Dark Wolf. I got wardrobe. And I looked at him, I'm like, oh, man, like, you're going right from this into Jack Carr's universe, and I know what that universe is. And that's not like a small love story on a beach where he's going to be, drinking wine with a girl, talking about, love. Mm-hmm. I'm like, dude, take a nap, man. Take a nap.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was a busy year for him. And then also, what's it like to direct yourself? I noticed you in this thing, getting the acting in.
Yeah, I was actually nervous for the first time because they kind of messed with me. Like I always like to do a little part, just like a line or two. And Markel like dared me. He wrote kind of a fairly substantial amount of dialogue for me. And I sort of was ignoring it because I haven't had to memorize dialogue, much less really act. Like I'm good for a couple of lines here or there, but and I just like doing that for posterity's sake. But so now I got this real role, and we're like 65, 70 days into the shoot, and it's coming up, and I haven't even really looked at it. And they're starting to get me for clothes and and all this stuff. And I'm like, this is really happening. And I'm like, I don't know if my brain will remember these lines. I'm like starting to go, so I like, and I don't remember until the night before. Okay. I'm like, fuck it, I got it. And so I go back into my old acting mode from Chicago Hope, Billy days, and I do my techniques, which is writing it down and breaking it up and saying, and I get on the set, I'm like, guys, I have no idea. I've never done this. I've never directed myself. I've been active, had to say this many lines in a while. Please, everybody be nice. And they were great. And I actually remembered my lines. And then I started remembering what I loved about acting. I started getting into it. And I started not caring about all the other stuff, like how much time and the crew. And finally, I was like, let's do it again. Let's do it again. And then finally, the first Indian and producer were like, Pete, we got to move on.
We got it.
I want to go again. And it's such a good reminder for any director, because you forget what the experience of being an actor is. And it's a unique experience to have that camera pointed at you and to know that, it's just a different feeling, and you've experienced some of it even, on a podcast. But, when you're the focal point of that kind of attention, it creates a unique series of challenges. And for me, acting again, even if it's just, a part like this or smaller, it reminds me of what the experience of those actors are. So the times when I want to come up and grab an actor and just say, just do it well, for God's sake, just do it better. Remember that that's not a good strategy, right?
Well, I was going to text you right because you did a good job. You could tell that you were enjoying it and you were good at it, which was so cool. And all the costumes for everybody were so great because they were all period specific, but they were all just a little bit different. So you could differentiate people by their clothing. But you crushed it. And I was going to text you, but then I'm like, you know what? I'll save it for when we get on the podcast because then I know we'd be texting too much back and forth. And
flattery will get you everywhere, Jack. Remember that. Everyone ever tells you, people like to hear that, especially actors.
Well, it's true. Well, it's so true. And I haven't had to do any lines yet, but I've had a cameo in the last one. I get killed, get to be in a shootout. Got killed, right? Yeah, I got killed. Got to be in that shootout, so I got to see how you put bullet holes in glass, and got to take my direction and do all that. And then I take Chris Pratt aside and say that if this was real life, it would have gone down a little differently here. Because he never would have. But I might have some lines in the next one, though. Might have some lines in True Believer.
And like I say, it's fun. It's cool to have for, to show your grandkids one day, but it also, to spend a day as an actor, go get there too early, have a shitty breakfast, go into your honey wagon, wait around for 7 hours, like really experience it. Remember that movie Redford did Brubaker? Did you ever see that?
I know what it is, but I haven't seen it.
He plays the new warden of a hardcore prison, but he goes in as a prisoner for a week before he announces that he's the new warden. And going in as an actor on anything that you're, producing or directing and seeing what the experience is from another angle, I think just makes you better.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like in the SEAL teams being enlisted first and being a sniper and knowing the comms and knowing all those things, and then all of these, and at the same time building up this reputation based on your performance and your character. Now, when you're in a leadership position, if you transition over, become an officer, or even work your way up, and now you're a chief or a LPO of a platoon or whatever it is, you have that foundation that people know upon which to build. So you were that assistant one day, and now you're here, and you know how important that that person is down here. So
So
I bet you treat those assistants so well. And I see what they do because I'm watching everything. I'm always learning, and I'm always watching, and I see what those assistants do on set, and it would stop without these guys. Without
For sure. It's fun for me to be able to, I'll always have a PA dinner. Like I'm Primeval, I had all of them over in my house in New Mexico. We had this dinner, and to be able to say, guys, I did your job.
Yeah.
I know what you're doing, and like you can get anywhere. If this is what you want, if you want to direct movies or you want to produce movies, I'm here to show you that you can, and I really enjoy that.
Yeah. And the casting in this, I also wanted to say that, like, when I watch it, sometimes you watch something, you're like, I think somebody else could have done this a little bit differently. Maybe that would have added to the show. The casting in this was impeccable. Everybody was so good. I mean, you talked about Betty Gilpin, amazing. The Preston, who played the kid.
Preston, young kid, his first movie.
Oh my gosh, that kid was amazing.
He was great. He was sweet.
It was incredible. And how do you say her name? Shawnee
Yeah,
Two Moons.
Mm-hmm. These two had never acted before, and I had to they'd just be giggling and laughing, and right before take, I go, guys, you have to stop giggling. This is really dangerous right now. And they'd snap into it, and they were that kind of having young energy like that with the newness, and they're so excited, and they're just like beaming with positivity. It was great for everyone to have that energy on the set.
Yeah, they were so good. And Jai Courtney, who was in the Terminal List, he's in there as well. So good. Is it Shea Wiggum? Is that how you say his name?
Yeah,
so good as Jim Bridger. That was
very good.
Amazing.
Great cast.
Yeah, that was incredible. We talked about how challenging this was and how brutal this was. Those themes of fear, survival, morality, all there together. And I've heard you say about this. I think you said something along the lines of you wanted to make the most dynamic, intense, heart-pounding survival tale humanly possible. And I don't know if you said that or not, but if you did, I can tell you succeeded.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know if I said it that well, but I appreciate it. But you wanted. What's the point of doing this if we don't feel like we have some challenges that we're laying out in front of us? And, I wanted the film to be emotional. I wanted people to get emotionally involved, and I want these characters to be nuanced and for the story to be, involving, all of that. But I also wanted for it to be very visceral.
Yeah. Well, you crushed it on this. Can't wait for people to watch it. And I know I got to let you go soon. I appreciate you taking all this time with me. It's always so great to talk to you, catch up. I hope we can do it in person again very soon. But what else is on your list of films that you want to make? Are there things out there that are short term and then some that are longer term?
So, my dad was a Marine, and he served in Korea. And I've wanted to do something around the Marine Corps for a while. As I used to like to say, the Navy SEALs are incredible and I love them, but they're kind of the Kim Kardashians of the military, right? They're really good at promoting themselves, as they should be. But, and I love the SEAL community and will till my last breath on this planet. But the Marines, I felt, is something that I would like to pay homage to. And my cousin who wrote Friday Night Lights, Buzz Bissinger, wrote this extraordinary book called The Mosquito Bowl, came out last year. True story about a group of all-American college football players who were having amazing college careers in 1941, had the world by the balls. And when Pearl Harbor hit, they all instantly dropped out of college and joined the Marine Corps. And within they had, I think, maybe 6 weeks of training at Parris Island and were sent to Tarawa, and they were fighting for their lives instantly. And it follows these ex-college football players through football into Tarawa to Guadalcanal, where they played one last football game, which was, they say, the most violent football game ever played, where there were 5,000 Marines on the island, and there were 30 All-American football players. So these two regiments had a final Marine football game, knowing that it was probably going to be their last game because they were all heading off to Okinawa, where they did. and I think 75%, give or take, were killed in Okinawa. So it's the story of these Marines. And I don't know what else is out there for me because I always focus on one at a time, but this is now next for me.
Wow.
Mosquito Ball.
Wow. Amazing. And
You're going to love it.
I can't wait to watch it. And I forget if we talked about this before. My grandfather was a Marine, and he was killed off Okinawa in 1945. He flew the Corsair, which is that plane that had the gull wings that would fold up. The same one, Pappy Boynton. So my dad and I would watch Baba Black Sheep Squadron. And I saw it in syndication in the early 80s. It came out in the late 70s, obviously, with Robert Conrad portraying Pappy Boynton. And so we'd watch that show together, and that was part of our connection to that generation before there was social media and Facebook and ways to connect with people from my dad who might have known his father, because he never knew his father. He was killed when he was very young. So, but yeah, right off Okinawa. What's that?
She shot down?
No, he's killed on his aircraft carrier was hit by 2 kamikazes off Okinawa in May of 1945.
The kamikaze story, that actually is an interesting story to me. I went to the Kamikaze Museum in Japan, and I mean, horrific what happened to your grandfather and so many sailors, because the Okinawa obviously is when the kamikazes really went off. Some of the stories of these young kamikazes are 15-year-old kids who are just basically taken and given some sake and taught a little bit about how to control an airplane when it was in the air, never to land it, and sent off in these horrific missions. It was just an incredibly brutal battle of Okinawa.
Yeah, there's a book called Danger's Hour, and it follows one of the pilots who ends up crashing his plane into the bunker hill, and then the building of the bunker hill, and how they come to this time and place together off Okinawa in May of 1945.
Yeah,
really good, powerful book.
Kamikaze, who they have the famous picture of him with a puppy the night before. There's a great photo of a group of kamikazes. I think they're so young, and if you just Google kamikazes with puppy,
it'll pop
it's
up.
like 5 kamikazes the night before they went on their operation. These kids look 13 years old, these boys, and one of them is holding a puppy, because one of the things the Japanese military would do was let them have a puppy to sleep with the night before their mission, which kind of blew my mind. But wow,
I did not know that.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. But I mean, he inspired me to. I think it was in my blood, regardless. But I got to grow up with his the maps they used to give aviators back then that were made out of silk, because if they were paper, they obviously hit the water, they disintegrate. But silk just gets wet, you can still use them. So I had those of his. I had his medals, had his wings, pictures of him and his squadron, black and white photos of him on the plane and standing on the wing and all that. So those were an important part of my childhood, I think.
He had your dad young.
Yeah, he was like 20. I want to say he was 22 or 23. So yeah, early 20s, kind of what people did back then. Yeah.
Different breed, my friend.
Yeah, my dad was born in Mojave, where they were training while they were getting ready to go, training up back there. And I got to let you go, but in all these things that you've done, all the acting, all the writing, all the directing, producing. Is there something that you like the best, or do you like a combination? Sometimes you've done that. You've been the writer, you've been the director, you've been the producer, and other times you've been just the director. Other times you've been just 2 of those things, the writer, director. Is there a combination that you like, or do you like to mix it up?
I kind of look at it kind of like we were talking about at the start of this conversation with all those ghosts that speak to us. I find that all of it is engaging. I find that all of it is something that I learned something from. When I directed my first episode of Chicago Hope, and I had Ricardo Montalban, and I thought this was going to suck, and it ended up being one of the great experiences of my life. I try to look at it as one long ride. Don't know how long we have on this planet, and to try and just enjoy all of it and find the art, find the beauty and the creation in absolutely all of it. So it's all kind of one big experience for me.
Yeah. And to that PA, that assistant that's on set, that's just starting his first job, that just got in there day 1, week 1, but wants to be you one day. What do you say to that kid?
I say, if they make you wrap yourself in garbage bags and get in the dumpster, do it. and do it with as much enthusiasm and clarity as you can muster, and things should work out.
Man, I love it. I love it. I know I got to let you go, but I want to get you back here to Utah, or I'll see you in LA or somewhere along the line here pretty soon. But I also want to thank you for your friendship, and thank you for all you do to support the military and our veteran community. I know you that hold a special place in your heart. So thank you for that, and man, hopefully I'll see you soon.
I hope so.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, take care. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to watch another episode, or click here to watch a clip of your podcast.